This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donny Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on 101 ESPN.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast. It's brought to you by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. We are recording here in the Jeff Burton Studios. Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic sitting diagonally from me. To my left, Mr. Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, also handling all of your Blues pre- and post-game. Gentlemen, I was really fine with the Blues not making the play. Like I was all right. I was like, all right, baseball season. I got football before too terribly long. And then I started watching the playoff games.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah.
That was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. My wife made one of those side comments to me. She's like, oh man, don't you wish you were watching these in person? And I'm like, that was unnecessary. It's like, come on now. I just hit vacation mode and you're going to hit me with that right away?
There is just, and we don't have to sit on it or anything, but there is just something so perfectly wonderful about NHL playoff hockey. I love all sports, but there is nothing to me that is like watching those games. And it seems like as the weekend got on, that the games got more heated, that the games got better. So yeah, I'm definitely sort of missing
especially
it.
I did a side thread with Alex, and I said, how long till we get the Buffalo Sabres text from Donny? So then here comes the podcast.
It was about
thread.
an hour after we sent that side text?
And then he's like, I love the Buffalo Sabres. But when I bring that up because of that scene outside the rink, I mean, just amazing. Yeah. And they deserve it, 14 years.
It's weird though, because like I have this awkward tie to where I was actually rooting that they'd miss it because now we don't have a scratching post in the NHL, like
the whipping post.
Yeah. You don't have the team that I feel like, at least we're not the Buffalo Sabres. I guess it's the Maple Leafs, but they make the playoffs. I mean, that was 17 years since they had made the playoffs.
I don't know why, and it shouldn't because they're the same people, but I was watching a lot of that pregame activity by the Sabre fans. They were like beating up
the mannequin.
A mannequin, and I was just like, I know that you're all Bills fans and we should be kind of brothers and stuff, but boy, I don't.
You didn't like that one?
I find this to be very obnoxious, but I guess if I went that long without, they're living in it and I shouldn't freaking hate on that.
I get it. I saw the same video though and I'm like, really? I don't think we have to go out there and fight a mannequin, but I guess if you're the Buffalo Sabres, what's been the chirping point for these two teams? We're tougher than you. You're bigger than us. So what do you have to do? You have to go out and show Boston that you're tougher than them by beating up the mannequin.
Yeah. And how about they beat him up with on the ice with Tage Thompson, the former Blue? What a performance.
Anybody else regretting that Blues trade now?
No, you can't regret that trade, right?
Yeah. It would be wonderful to have the dude here, no doubt about it. But, at least if I died tomorrow, the Blues won a cup.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Not to make it so dark.
Not even won a cup. Should have been to at least another cup final, if not for the following year being shut down by COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, that team, people forget that team was the best team in the Western Conference. They were rolling as well as anybody. And then, of course, COVID happened. Jay Bomeister doesn't come back, and the team kind of dismantles from there. But, yeah, I can only imagine when people see Tage Thompson do that, and people are like, would like to have that guy right about now. It's like, calm down, everybody.
You know what? I want to bring something up, and this is real tacky, and I know that I shouldn't bring it up, but if there's anybody that's going to do it, it's going to be me. When he was getting interviewed after the game last night, did you guys notice anything that was said?
Yeah.
The reporter said, this is the only franchise that you've ever known or played for.
Yeah.
And listen, man, I know that is a hard job. I cannot imagine how difficult it is to interview somebody in those circumstances.
But you got to do your prep work.
But you got to know that, man.
Yeah.
I did not, that was a bummer to me.
Well, because that's a massive mispronunciation. I mean, to sit there and say you've only known one franchise. It's No, it would be a lot more meaningful if you were Tage Thompson to only know one franchise.
Yeah.
Like, you were traded to that. Like, if that's Jack Eichel standing there, then we're having a different conversation.
100%.
Like, you got to do your prep work on that one. As much as I understand, like, yeah, that's a big moment. Something like that, you know ahead of time if Tage Thompson had been a part of, you knew he was drafted or you didn't know he was drafted.
Man, if I'm interviewing a band, I'm doing everything that I can to know the ins and the outs for wherever that conversation is going to go. And I'm not saying that I know everything every time, but I at least make sure that I have the flipping, the basic sort of things in which that I need to kind of go off of. And I saw that and I heard her say that and I was like, click, that'll be enough of that. I just thought that was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, and we've all had those situations,
yes.
But we've been in situations where when you're getting ready to ask the question, if you're just a bit unsure, then you just go vague with the question and say, hey, this is the first time in 14 years. So Blues fans probably watching it saying, well, I think we drafted that guy.
Yeah, right. So the reason in which that we're podcasting here today specifically is to talk about the season-ending press conference that happened on Saturday at Enterprise Center with Jim Montgomery, Doug Armstrong, and a whole host of players. Guys, the first thing that I would like to ask you were in that room, you were there. What was sort of the general overall feeling in that room? I hate to use the word vibe. I hate it. But
vibe check.
But was there one? Did you sort of feel one that afternoon?
I felt the vibe was...
I hate it. I even hate saying it.
Give me your vibe check, JR.
I felt the vibe, Donny.
Title of the podcast,
the vibe check. During this answer, yeah. Okay, so I kind of wrote it in my story where I said that last year, like, you could still see the smack in the face on their face from what happened with the late goals in the Winnipeg Game 7, and it was still shock, and it was still trying to understand what happened. And this year, as you looked at the faces on stage, you could see that, yeah, we've kind of known this was coming for months and months and months. I thought that the Blues, Doug Armstrong, who we'll talk to on Wednesday here in this seat next to me, and Jim Montgomery did a great job of saying these last however many games since the Olympics, we're not putting stock in that. Like, the pressure was not on these guys. Now, some people might say, yeah, it was to make the playoffs, but not true pressure, not real pressure, not the pressure that they normally face. And so I think they did a good job of kind of dismissing whatever success we want to call that down the stretch. I also thought Doug Armstrong said it well, and I put it in my story where he said the teams that I've been involved with in the past who have had success enjoy the grind. They want you to punch them in the face so that you can punch them back.
Yeah.
And that's what this team doesn't have. This team, has the uniform on. It's game night. They play the game. I'm not saying they're going through the motions, but it's not a taking control of the situation type team, type roster. And I think that's where they need to get to. So those are the two big picture things. I'm sure we'll get into a bunch of detail. But what was your vibe?
Oh, man, vibe check. Let me tell you guys here. From a 1 to 10, and 10 being like Donny at a, a Godsmack concert. Would that be it?
That would be
No. A 10 at a Rascal Flatts concert. We'll go that front. I would say the vibe was at about a 5.
Yeah.
Vibe check there? Okay, that's good. On top of what JR mentioned, a couple of things. One was the slow starts, hearing a lot of the players than Jim Montgomery give reaction to the slow starts in terms of how it's an attitude thing, kind of the punch them in the face, punch right back. They just don't have that attitude. I did find it pretty interesting where Jim Montgomery addressed how he felt like he handled it incorrectly earlier in the season, to where he said he kind of got after the guys after that LA Kings game and he didn't handle it properly. The players didn't react to it and things fell apart. No coincidence. That was the beginning of that 7-game losing streak from the team. I found that one interesting. And then honestly, the direction of the teams, I'm hitting like bullet points right here. We can dive deeper, but Doug talked about kind of the short and the medium term outlook for the team, and then kind of addressed it with the players of like, we've got to figure out where we're at in terms of the short term and the medium term, and then we can figure out who fits into that criteria. So I thought that the way that they framed it was a bad season. And I think Doug Armstrong even said at the end, I thought we'd be better. And then the attitude factor into this, and then figuring out who fits into that attitude of this team.
And before we dig deeper, I want to touch on something Alex just said. He talked about where Jim Montgomery said he got after the team. If folks didn't hear the press conference, Jim Montgomery said it was like Game 5 against Los Angeles. And he didn't want to see another month of October like we saw last year. So after they didn't play well, he got after him. And he said they looked at him and it was out of character. And he said they didn't respond well. And he was kind of, what do you call it, apology or whatever, just saying, okay, well, I didn't handle that well because they didn't respond well. And then it turned into that 7-game losing streak. My thing is, we weren't there. We don't know, what extent he got after him, what he said, anything like that. But A, that shouldn't lead to a 7-game losing streak. And B, I don't think the coach should be saying, hey, my bad after the season on something like that. Like, I think that's what we're talking about with the makeup of this team. Yeah. So regardless of what he said, regardless of how he said it, come out and respond. It's October. You've been saying the entire training camp, we need to have a good start. Okay, so your coach got after you. Get this thing on the right track.
That's the Doug Armstrong comment, though, of my experience being with teams has been they want to get punched in the mouth so that they can respond. That was Jim Montgomery punching him in the mouth, and their response was the 7-game losing streak. So I think that does tie into the attitude. I think that's why the whole approach went the way it went, to where it was like, look, I've got to try something. How many times have we heard coaches talk about, I've got to figure out how to coach and talk to these players? We heard Craig Berube talk about that, where some guys it's an open door policy, some guys you just chew into and they respond to it well. And I believe that's Jim Montgomery figuring it out, but I'm 100% with you, JR. Like, when he said that, it's like, I'm not apologizing for this at all if I'm the coach. Like, I understand where he's coming from because he feels like he's to blame, but I'm not apologizing for that at all. The players didn't respond to it when they played like ish. Other coaches around the National Hockey League have done that, and I think that goes to show you just the DNA of some teams, that this is why you've got to fix whatever's taking place in that locker room.
All right, now listen, this can work against me as well, but one of the reasons in which that I really enjoy watching the press conferences after the games, watching the player availability, the coach availability, is because I feel like you garner little nuggets of information in between all of these sort of words. And to me, that whole thing with Monty is so telling about this team. So your coach chews on your ass because you have just been playing like crap, and your response is to turtle up and then lose 7 in a row. Like, I understand that Monty probably as a coach looks back and goes, you know what? I could have chosen my words differently. I could have, I could have handled this situation better. But at the end of the day, it is these gosh dang players. And that to me says a whole lot about what's going on in that dressing room and the need for some kind of makeup in there to be changed up this offseason.
I'll give you a couple of examples. Earlier in the season when Florida was struggling, I remember Paul Maurice going to the podium, and this was when they were without Matthew Tkachuk and Barkov, and he went to the podium, and I think he made the statement of, this is not Stanley Cup caliber play. And the players came out and responded with a 3-game win streak. The Tampa Bay Lightning, when they would go through their struggles, John Cooper would very outspoken speak about the style of how it's not matching. Even when Colorado, after they were winning, Jared Bednar's press conference was, hey, we're going to have to find some adversity. Otherwise, this is going to be too easy of a season for us. Like, all of these guys have found different ways to not call or chew out their team, but be outspoken about, hey, this has to change, and the players respond. I think some of that is youth, but I think some of that is figuring out who sticks into this timeline that they're looking at. And I have to imagine both Doug Armstrong and Alex Steen, when they saw the 7-game losing streak after whatever Jim Montgomery had said, because, I was trying to think back of the press conferences of like, was when he questioned effort? I don't remember that early in the season, but that's where you have to wonder. It's like, yeah, that's probably when they knew the writing was on the wall of, yeah, this season might be in for a long one, and we're going to have to really start making some surgical changes.
I got an idea though. Here's a situation. Maybe when he was thinking about, how could I get this out there, that's what I'm dealing with in this locker room. Sometimes when I wish my wife would do a better job of maybe doing the laundry, doing this, doing that. instead of telling her that she needs to do a better job, I just say, you know what, I could do a better job of doing the line. And then she jumps and does some things that, see, I just take the blame. So that's what Monty was doing. He was like, hey, here's a situation where I could be better. By the way, these guys, look at the way they responded.
I mean, but you're right. I mean, I feel like he's kind of fallen on the sword a bit.
Take the blame for it, but show that, hey,
this is it.
This is how they responded. Yeah.
I'm with you.
So I want to start with the first 3 players that were on the podium. We'll get to everybody, but in Thomas, in Parayko, in Binnington. First of all, I want to start with Benner. I think that my opinion has changed a lot. It seems like him coming back here and working with Hofer next year and playing out the last year of his deal in St. Louis is a real possibility. And I think that sounds great. But also, there is something so unique about that man's character. In listening to him in that press conference, it seemed as though his performance was on him, his performance to get better. He was going to figure out ways to get it done. And then also the way that he talked about the team. Like, I just love the way that this guy's mind works. And it also seems to me that maybe he is a important personality to have in that locker room going forward and going into next year.
Well, Jim Montgomery said he is a massive piece of the leadership of that team.
Absolutely.
I'm 100% with you. I think it is best for the Blues to keep him with this upcoming season. I just don't think the return is going to be as good as people think it might be. And then hearing him talk about his process and how he needs to be better with it, and then hearing Joel Hofer talk about how he kind of pushes him to be better, and it's that competition in between each other. I could see a scenario where Joel Hofer struggles early on and Jordan Binnington takes the net next season, and Binnington goes on a run kind of like what Hofer did in November, and then he takes back the net, and then it's a little bit of a competition. Like, that's just Jordan Binnington. I'll be fascinated to find out what the conversations are like with Steen, though, because what he did say was that he's a competitor and he's going to be a competitor. So, the question was posed, can you see yourself as a backup, whether it's with the Blues or somewhere else? I don't think Jordan Binnington views it as I'm a backup goaltender. So it's going to be a matter of, well, what do the Blues view it as? You got 84 games next year. Are we talking about 48 and 36 games? Are we talking 42 and 42 games? Like, what are we talking about for those two? And then I think it's going to come down to what Jordan Binnington wants. But the health of this team, you need one more year, I think, of Binnington with Joel Hofer.
Yeah, I'm sort of convinced now, especially after listening to Doug Armstrong say you need 2 goalies, that the Blues' plan is probably to keep them, because you can't just go out and you lose him and then you go grab somebody and you hope for the best. Like, what you have here. I look at it, I keep looking at it from Jordan Binnington's perspective when people say, do you think Jordan Binnington is going to be back? Because in his answer to that question was, you guys know I'm a competitive goalie. Well, a competitive goalie doesn't go into a season, yep, I'm the 1B and I might get 35 starts and we'll see what happens. The other thing is this, it's the last year of his contract. It's a $6 million AAV. Can he go to a team where he's more of the 1A and he has a chance to take the 1A job? Because then when his contract is up and he signs either with that team again or with another team, can you get an extension that's, gives him another big contract, whether it's 3, 4, 5 million AAV as opposed to a 1.8 as a 1B backup. Yeah. He probably wants that one more contract in his career. So we'll see, does he think he has a better chance of doing that somewhere else, or does he think he has a better chance that where he's comfortable in St. Louis, even though there is a Joel Hofer here, that he knows that if he could get on a roll and get on a run, that even though Joel Hofer's the guy of the future, they'd stick with him for a little bit. I feel like he thinks he has to have that opportunity.
Well, and the best chance to get a bigger contract if you're Binnington is stay with the team that you're comfortable with, like you mentioned, but goalies that play 38 games and go out there and post a sub 2.5 goals against average, those guys get long-term contracts. How desperate are teams in the NHL when a great goalie who may be a backup somewhere becomes a free agent? They're like, well, we'll give this guy a shot. And then they go on to have success or they don't have success. Like, look in St. Louis, for example. Carter Hutton put together a couple of incredible years with the Blues. And he went out there and he got himself that long-term contract with the Buffalo Sabres. Now, it didn't work out for him, but you still got the contract contract, which is what Jordan Binnington's going to want more than anything. So, plus, I think if you're the Blues and you're looking at it saying, okay, well, we're going to have the second year of Logan Mailloux, we're going to have Theo Lindstein for a full season, you're going to have Adam Jiricek for a full season, man, our goaltending is going to have to cover up a lot of our warts next year. It's better to have two goaltenders that can go out there and be number ones for us rather than have a number one who, if he gets exhausted, we're turning to a number two, and he may not be able to carry the load for us.
I'm really excited to see Robert Thomas play at the World Championships. I feel as though that this is like the Robert Thomas I'm taking it all back tour. You know what I mean? Like
Donny would be at that concert.
Like he is here to show you that he is a number one. There is no doubt about it. But what did you guys see? What do you think about the things in which that he and Parayko said, specifically where they talked about those conversations that haven't happened with Steiner yet that still need to happen?
Yeah, I think they handled it as well as you could. You knew the questions were coming. There's going to be some talk this offseason, obviously outside speculation, but even inside. Robert Thomas wants to know what is the Blues plan and how long do they think it's going to be before they're competing again? And if it's 4 or 5 years, then maybe he wants to move on. Maybe he'll accept a trade if they bring one to him. And maybe the same for Colton Parayko. And they said, like you said, we'll have those talks with Alexander Steen. So I don't know. We asked Thomas about his finish. He said the health, that was a big deal. Mm-hmm. I asked, I think it was Doug Armstrong, about the presence that he showed the past couple months of the season. Doug said, and we'll talk to him Wednesday, he said that, we need the full season out of some of these guys, including Robert Thomas. Can't just do it after Four Nations, after the Olympics. So I think we got to see, as Donny, you've been saying for a while now, that the true Robert Thomas, it's just that we can't answer the question of whether he's there until next October, November, if he's playing the way he did here in March and April.
Well, and I think Thomas's answer kind of plays into Doug Armstrong's answer when he talked about that short term, the 1-year term, and then the 3-year term of kind of where's the team at? Because the original answer from Doug, I don't know if you caught it, I immediately was like, whoa, because the way he framed it was like, yeah, we'll see if they fit into that plan for us.
1 to 3.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, so that's pretty telling. But then he, without being asked, kind of doubled down, and he was like, look, nobody's higher on Robert Thomas than Doug Armstrong. I believe he said that he is a number one center in the league. So if somebody wants him, you're paying the price of what I value him at, which is why you don't see him get moved, nor do you see a Colton Parayko get moved. So originally when I heard it, I'm like, oh, okay, so he's saying they're not a part of this plan. And then he kind of backed it up and said, no, they're a part of this plan. It's just a matter of, do they want to be a part of this plan? And that's the part that none of us have the answer on. We're not going to really have the answer until we talk with Steen on July 1st, because I'll be fascinated to hear what the plan is delivered to Thomas and Parayko and how they take it, because Broberg heard the plan, and Broberg said, I'm all aboard this. I'm here for 6 years, and signed that contract. I have to imagine, I think Dylan Holloway referenced it. He heard the plan and seems like he wants to be a part of this.
Which is easier because those guys are a lot younger.
For sure. Right. But I mean, in Holloway's case, he's 2 years younger than Robert Thomas. Yeah. So, but Thomas has been around a really long time. So I guess that could be the back and forth with that. So I don't know. I didn't get the vibe that Robert Thomas wants out. He didn't say it like, I want to be in St. Louis. I didn't get the vibe that Robert Thomas wants to be shipped out of St. Louis. I did get the vibe of, hey, we need to hear from Steen what the plan is, because we've seen Doug's plan. Now I want to see what Steen's plan is before I decide if this is where I'm going to stay.
Absolutely. Well, let's do this. Let's take a break. I want to come back, talk about a couple more players, and then let's go through Monty. Let's go through Doug Armstrong here real quick. And again, a reminder that on Wednesday morning, we will have Doug Armstrong in the studio to have a live podcast with him. So we look forward to that. But let's come back. Second segment of the Last Minute Blues podcast on the way. All right, segment 2 here of the Last Minute Blues podcast. So in watching some of the players speak, I got to tell you, and I know I've been all over I wanted to give Jordan Kyrou a hug. That dude, I don't even, he just, and it's probably just me and my perception of it, he just looked sad. and the way even in which that he spoke. I mean, he spoke so highly of this city. I don't know, guys. I don't even know what to even say or think about this guy anymore, other than I just genuinely believe at this point in time for the team and for the player, I just think it's probably better if he's moved this summer. And I've said it on the podcast too. I'm tired of hearing people bitch about him as much as anything else. It drives me friggin' bonkers, even though I do understand why they do. But what do you think about, did he give you guys any sort of nuggets of anything?
I don't think he gave nuggets. I think he answered it the way you'd expect him to answer it. Like he was asked by JR, do you want to be in St. Louis and do you want to be a part of this youth movement? And he said, yeah, I love the city of St. Louis. I've been here long term. I like this plan. I like the youth that's coming in. I want to be a part of it. What are you expecting him to say? Right. Like it would be a massive bomb if he was just like, nope, I'm out.
Sure.
So he gave the proper answers, and he was also asked about, his sluggish start. And he said, it's just an individual thing. I got to get back to work. I hear Jordan Kyrou talk and it just sounds like an exhausted player. Mm-hmm. And it's not exhausted from the workload of the season. I think it's just a mental exhaustion of always feeling like you got to jump through hoops, always feeling like you got to do this perfect. Otherwise people are going to single you out. I mean, how many whipping boys have we seen in Blues history from guys? And I'm not defending him here. I'm just saying, like, go through it. I was a teenager at the time. I despised Eric Brewer because he was not Chris Pronger. And so you just berate the guy, everything he does wrong. Jay Bouwmeester I did this for. People did this for all the way up until they won the Stanley Cup. So Jordan Kyrou is just that guy. Hearing him talk, though, and then just kind of hearing Jim Montgomery talk when he was asked, who is Jordan Kyrou? Hearing Doug Armstrong talk of who is Jordan Kyrou, all of them said the same thing. He's a dynamic offensive player when he wants to be. And that, unfortunately, is the problem with Jordan Kyrou. I understand everybody's analytics that they put out on social media of this guy is going to be an incredible player wherever he goes. I totally believe that. I believe he'll go somewhere and score 35 to 40 goals. I just don't know if he will do that again for the Blues. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I think he's going to get moved. It's just because sometimes it doesn't work with teams that you've been a part of for a long time.
Yeah, it's tough because that setting is tough, the press conference, because it's a stage, you're going to be in there for 10 minutes.
And you're live on YouTube.
15 questions. It's going to be quick. You can't get in depth. So I don't want to be overcritical of his answer. But you phrase the question in a way where you put the ball in his court to explain his season or, how can he be better? And so that's how I phrased the question. I said, hey, reflecting, looking back, what did you think of your season? Now, Jordan Binnington was asked about his situation. And he said, I've got to get back to the process. I've got to work. And he said, it doesn't matter what I say. I've got to come out and play better.
Yep.
And I can't wait to get back to that process and come back better. When we asked Jordan Kyrou that question, he said, yeah, it wasn't the season that I wanted offensively. But when the team kind of gets off track, it's hard to pull it back for everybody. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of looking more big picture with the team as opposed to analyzing his season. And I'm not saying he had to say the exact same words that Jordan Binnington said, but I think in reading the comments from Blues fans, they would have liked Jordan Kyrou to be a little more
self-critical,
a little more Jim Montgomery.
Just assess himself a little bit. And the other thing is, you were talking about picking up on little nuggets, here and there from press conferences. The one thing that I always look forward to is when Jim Montgomery and Doug Armstrong are asked about a player. Sometimes you can tell just by their immediate reaction. And when you ask them about Jordan Kyrou, there's typically a pause because, you're trying to think of how should I say this? And also, it's not, guys, Jordan Kyrou is fine. Like he hit 20 posts this year and those are going to start going in. He's working hard. He's doing the right things. Instead, it's Doug Armstrong saying, if I'm Jordan Kyrou, I'm waking up tomorrow. He's a guy who's in the prime of his career and needs to. When you start hearing the word needs to 3 times in the sentence, that's what you can pick up on in terms of what he needs to do. So again, we're just taking that from the press conference. I mean, if you had an hour-long sit down with Jordan and, you had a closer relationship and you're able to really dig deep and get some thoughts, I just think that Blues fans want to see Jordan Kyrou produce throughout the course of a season on a consistent basis and not just see him at the stage at the end of the year at the press conference saying, I'm going to hit the reset button and be better next year. How about hitting the reset button in November or December, as opposed to talk about hitting it in April?
Absolutely so. Dylan Holloway, another one of the folks interviewed there on Saturday, saying how much he loves St. Louis, wants to be in St. Louis, believes in the plan. But then Doug Armstrong, in his part, saying, hey, this guy's got to stay healthy. We got to know that we're going to have him for the entire year. What do you guys, how do you guys view the Dylan Holloway situation as we go into the offseason? Obviously, I think a deal gets done. I just wonder what that deal is sort of looking at from both sides.
Yeah, I personally think you're going to see a bridge deal.
Yep.
Now, I don't know what the appetite is for bridge deals anymore, especially in this day and age with money going up.
Holloway, too, specifically. Yeah.
So, I mean, I say a bridge deal, I could see him just doing a 1-year deal, right? And then just pushing the RFA status to another year and letting him play a full season and be healthy and then going a long-term contract. I mean, if I'm the Blues, and I mean, I'm not, they're smarter than I am, but I totally get the injury and saying like we need him for a 82 game schedule. But I also look at what Dylan Holloway does when he's healthy, and it's like, this guy produces. Like, I mean, this isn't like, well, we need to see him healthy because he's slow out of the gate when he comes back from his injuries that he has had. I mean, from the moment he returned post-break, which I know is a little bit lengthier of time off, I mean, the guy, I think he missed 4 games where he didn't pick up at least a point. So I look at this and be like, the injuries you had was a fluke injury where he ran into a guy and his muscle just tears off the bone. And then you had the high ankle sprain from running into Pavel Buchnevich in practice. So I would go long-term with this guy because I think he's a core DNA piece of the team. But I understand Doug Armstrong and probably Alex Steen's hesitancy of being like, yeah, but if he gets injured one time, then you're paying all of this money for a guy that's just not going to be there. So I thought it was good that he said he wants to be here long term, which you'd expect him to say. I don't know if I expect a long-term deal. I think you're probably looking at a bridge deal for Dylan Holloway.
Yeah. And we shouldn't be surprised that Doug Armstrong came out and said that, hey, we need to see him healthy because, hey, that's the contract. That's negotiating. That's setting the table for, what could happen. I'm a guy who always looks at situations and saying, hey, where would I be kicking myself? If I did this, would I be kicking myself? If I did this? And if you're the Blues, you give him a long-term deal and he's hurt next year, you could be kicking yourself. The one thing that we should talk about is people will say, well, what about if he goes out and scores 50 goals next year? Then the Blues are really going to be paying. Guess what? That's what the Blues want. That's what the Blues want. So let's just hypothetically say that he's got a $8 million AAV right now, and he goes out and scores 50 goals. Well, now his AAV is 10 or 11, 12, whatever. That's what the Blues want. So they don't mind paying that extra if he can show that he's healthy for, 84 games next year? 84 games next year, and he scores 50 goals. Okay, there's your $12 million.
Yeah.
And they won't mind paying it because he's shown it, as opposed to giving him 8 now and then he misses 40 games.
All right, I want to move on to the coach and to the GM, but as far as were there any other things, any other takeaways from players that kind of stuck out?
I'll give you one on Holloway because I don't know if you caught this, JR, or you, Donny, when you listened to it. Did anybody else hear Dylan Holloway talk when he was asked about the slow start of the season and think it was better than any other player that was asked?
Answer, yeah.
I mean, I heard him say that and I'm like, oh, another candidate that could be the captain. And we'll get to the leadership stuff when Jim Montgomery mentioned it. But man, I'm filming this for our social media when Robert Thomas was asked about the slow start, when Jordan Kyrou was asked about the slow start. And it's like, oh, okay, it's the generic answer you'd get. Then Dylan Holloway immediately was like, look, we can't be using excuses anymore. It's like, it's all about an attitude. We need to make sure we're prepared to come out and play.
Take it seriously.
Yes. Like everything he was saying, I'm like, man, that could be Jake Neighbor saying the same thing. And I'd be going, whoa, there's a captain for you. Like the way he answered that question to me is one of those guys that's a lead by example, that it'd say, hey, this is how Dylan Holloway's going to play. That's the guy that has that attitude of what Doug Armstrong was talking about, that like, it really does feel like Holloway wants to get punched in the mouth so that he can do that same thing back.
Absolutely.
So that was the biggest thing I took away was I heard him talking and I'm like, oh, damn, okay, yeah, that's a leadership quality right there for the Blues.
It was good. And talking about Dylan Holloway still being a young guy, I have to have my daughter interpret what Holloway is saying on some of these because he's using slang like chemistry is chem. We need some chem. So he said 2 or 3 of those types of words. Like, okay, I think I can figure it out, but I'm gonna have
he's that old school Canadian boy with the slang.
Is provided that he can stay healthy, is Dylan Holloway a potential superstar for this team? I know that's a lot. Superstar. Maybe that's a dumb question.
No, it's not a dumb question. Superstar is so hard because people have their different criterias for superstar.
Sure. I actually would maybe not superstar, because superstar, as I'm thinking about it, is somebody like Kaprizov or somebody along like those lines. But I mean, a star in the league.
I would say, to me, Dylan Holloway, if healthy, could put up 90 points in the NHL. Like, that's what I see. Now, I don't know if it's 40 goals and 50 assists. All I know is that guy looks like and plays like a guy that could put up 90 points. He's got the shot. He's aggressive on loose pucks. He goes to the front of the net. The question is just staying healthy. But like, I see that line, and I made this reference on postgame like 4 or 5 games ago. Maybe it was, I don't remember. But I was looking at it, and I looked at what Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slavkovsky did, and you know, you had a 100-point player, you had a 50-point player, you had 70 points from Slavkovsky in the season. And then I looked at it and I'm like, man, those guys have played together every single game for 3 straight seasons, this season being the 3rd season. And I'm like, if you fast forward 2 years from now and say that Thomas, Holloway, and Snuggerud stayed healthy, played 84 games, if I were to say Thomas put up a 100-point season, Holloway put up 90 points, and then Snuggerud put up 70 points, I don't think that's out of the question for those 3 guys. It's just staying healthy and keeping them together and having that chemistry there. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. I think Dylan Holloway's a guy that could put up 90 points in the NHL if healthy.
Yeah, and you know, the term star, not to overlook it, but you got like the McDavids, the Crosbys, those types of guys. Dylan Holloway to me is always going to be, even if he reaches those point totals, he's a different type of player. Like, he lays the big hit. He does this. He's constantly working hard. I think Alex's buddy Dom at The Athletic wrote it best not too long ago. He does so many things that probably don't equate to a massive contract star status, but yet he does them, and they're so great for your team. Mm-hmm. They're just smaller things that help you. So I think if the best way I always think of when I think of stars is his face going to be on the screen on TNT and ESPN when they say the Blues are playing Friday night. It might not be because he's not McDavid, but if people think of the Blues, they're going to think of Dylan Holloway.
Absolutely so. So let's do this. Let's take our final break. Let's come back, talk about some of the things that Monty said, and then also GM Doug Armstrong. 3rd segment, Last Minute Blues podcast, coming your way next. Final segment here, Last Minute Blues podcast. Want to specifically talk about the press conference on Saturday, which is what we have been doing, but specifically Doug Armstrong and Coach Jim Montgomery. We already kind of talked a bit about Montgomery and really taking it on the chin, I think, for the team and saying, I didn't handle this situation particularly well. I think the thing that was kind of sort of alarming to me in what Armstrong said and what Monty said is just sort of this, just the idea sort of that the team wasn't really locked in, wasn't really ready come October for the season to start, hence kind of how they started slowly. That was just something that they kind of reiterated that was very alarming to me. You expect the guys to be excited that the season's starting, but it just seems like maybe they weren't, the team wasn't ready.
Well, and I think what Jim Montgomery said is kind of what stood out to me. I think a lot of the players probably thought it was going to be easier for how the season ended the previous year, and everyone was prepared for them early on, and that's where some of that happened. But one of the bigger telling things that Jim Montgomery said was, look, preseason and camp now gets a little bit more difficult because we have to go harder to make sure we're ready for the regular season. And that's something that he said maybe we didn't do as good of a job on this past season. You also have to remember, and this is the one that I'm kicking myself that I didn't ask anybody afterwards, the camp is now 2 weeks. there's only 4 preseason games, and I think 2 of them are like where you have to play your veterans. So like you're getting 2 preseason games with these guys to try and tune up for the regular season. So hearing Jim Montgomery and Doug Armstrong both say like, yeah, now camp gets a lot more difficult to make sure that everyone is ready to go out of the gate for the regular season. And you're only going to be getting a couple of preseason games. You know, this past year, you didn't even see Holloway and Kyrou play with Braden Shen. You saw them play with Pius Suter. And how many times did that line happen in the regular season? So I'll be fascinated to see when we get there, but I don't think camp is going to be this kind of slowly get back into it. I think this is going to be, these are your criteria to make sure you're ready to go. And the moment you step on the ice when training camp opens up, it's going to act as if it's a regular season practice.
But here's the thing to me, it's got to be a mindset. It's got to be, it's got to be the player. It's got to be within them. Listen, you can have a great training camp. Jim Montgomery and the coaching staff can put together the best plan. Hey, these are the drills. This is what we're going to do. This is a team of players who came into the season and said that, we're going to be ready and we know how important a hot start is. And here we are 9 months later talking about how they weren't ready. So it can't be us talking about the Blues trying to have a good plan in place and they've got to analyze everything and it's got to be all set up for them and stuff like that. All that matters is the player's mindsets. If Jordan Kyrou says that I need to hit the reset button and be ready for a great year next year, all that matters is if he's ready for a great year when he shows up at training camp. And if Robert Thomas is still here, he's got to be able to pick up where he left off. And if Colton Parayko's here, he's got to have a better season than last year. But the group as a whole is the main thing. They've got to come together, look at each other from day one when they get there and say, look, October means as much as April and whatever it takes. And if you see some guy who's, taking the short path, hold them accountable. And, that's where the leadership group has to come in. And you can't be sitting there in November talking about, here we are again, third straight slow start. So to me, we can analyze it to death. Doug Armstrong, Montgomery, Steen, they can all analyze it to death. But it's the players who show up for camp have to be ready.
Well, and I think Doug Armstrong even said it. I mean, he said those leadership skates before training camp even starts, they need to be hard or something along those lines. Meaning you're not going to have the opportunity to warm it up in camp. Mm-hmm. You got to hit the freaking ground running from the literal second that camp starts because all of those early games matter.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I understand what Doug was saying. The only thing is they could be the most physical skates ever. They could be like, holy smokes, I haven't, practiced like this in my whole 20-year career. Okay, great. It still doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It still has to be a mental mindset of what we were talking about earlier. If you smack me, I'm going to smack you back.
And I totally get what you're saying because I don't think this is about individual guys coming into camp ready to go. The problem is individual guys coming in saying, I need to surpass what I did last season. Mm-hmm. Jordan Kyrou coming into camp saying, well, I can't have another 18-goal season. Or Pavel Buchnevich, I need to be more offensively involved. That's not what the issue is. No. The issue is not playing like a team from the moment the puck drops in the regular season. And you can go hard in camp all you want. Unless the players have that attitude to where it's, no, this is a team thing where we all have to be on the same page, then none of it matters. And that's where the leadership thing was the biggest thing. We've spent so much time on this show, in this podcast, talking about, could Jake Neighbors be the captain? Could Robert Thomas be the captain? I don't know if you felt this way. I left that thinking, I don't know if they're going to name a captain next year.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
I asked Jim Montgomery, and he gave me such a good answer just about the leadership qualities. He listed off all of the players that he felt like took a step in leadership. He said Philip Broberg. He said Robert Thomas, who was the vocal piece in the locker room. He said Jake Neighbors, the vocal piece on the bench. He mentioned Colton Parayko, who's the guy that's communicating with Jim Montgomery about the roster, very similar to what Braden Shen used to do. And then he mentioned Jordan Binnington. I mean, those are 5 guys right there. And I can't remember if it was Jim or Doug that said, it's hard to name a captain if you don't have a captain.
Monty said that.
Yeah. Thank you. And so I'm hearing these guys talk, and a lot of this is going to be on Alexander Steen's decision if he feels like it's valuable to have a captain. But I walked out of there going, I think they could go into a season and say, nope, we're not going to have a captain. We need all of you to come together as a group, so everyone's going to be on the same playing field. There's not going to be any, and I don't know this to be true, this is just my tinfoil, there's not going to be any clicks in terms of, well, this guy thinks he should have been the captain, and so he's not happy that this guy's the captain. Everyone's on the same playing field. I think that makes a ton of sense after hearing both of those guys talk and hearing how many guys Jim Montgomery values as leaders on this roster.
Okay, so when you hear your general manager, Doug Armstrong, say, the teams that I've worked with that I've, they look forward to getting punched in the mouth because they want a response, all right? If my boss said that about me, man, that would really hit home. Like if Tommy the boss said something along those lines to me, do you think that Doug Armstrong saying that to some of these players matters? Do you think that they hear that? Or do you think that that's just GM speak and it's right out the window?
I think it matters, and they probably heard it, and they probably think, damn, whatever. Then I think they get in their car and they drive home to Toronto, Detroit, Vancouver, wherever, and they start their offseason program and get ready. I don't know that this roster has the group of guys who will show up in September and remember it and say, I'm going to change that. And that's why I think they're changing the roster. Mm-hmm. Now, there might be 3 or 4 guys on this team that do that.
Yep.
But I think collectively as a group, what we've seen them miss the playoffs, 3 out of the last 4 years, is because that has been lacking. So they might hear it. It might piss them off. I don't know that it can change their mindset.
Mm-hmm. For me, too, I kind of think it's heard and then it's gone. And this is meant by no disrespect. Doug Armstrong's not the GM after this year. Mm-hmm. And I really wonder if they hear that and they're like, Steen's the one's taking over. So I think it should matter to all of them. Like if I'm putting myself in their shoes, like I'm probably calling some of those guys from those teams and being like, hey man, what happened? What worked so well? Mm-hmm. The amount of conversations I've had with David Backes in the past, it's like, man, that guy got it. So, but yeah, I think Doug Armstrong says that, and I feel like the players hear it and they're like, yeah, we need that. But like JR mentioned, then it's into the offseason program because there's going to be another voice.
That therein lies the problem though. For anybody, and I agree with you, but anybody who would think, yeah, but he's not going to be the GM, that means you don't think you have to do that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like you're looking for the excuse not to have to respond in the manner that you need to respond. And so guess what? Alexander Steen and Doug Armstrong have been working hand in hand. I'm pretty sure that they think fairly similarly.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that if Doug is saying it, Alex probably thinks it's.
Oh yeah. It's the same person.
Yeah. and so like if Doug's saying it, he's been doing this for a long time and he knows what it takes for teams to be successful. And why wouldn't a 23, 26-year-old guy think, hey, this guy probably knows what he's talking about?
That's the other thing, too. Like, I feel like if I'm Jake Neighbors, if I'm Dvorsky, if I'm Holloway, those younger guys, if I hear them saying that, oh, yeah, I think that resonates so well. Like, hearing a lot of those younger guys talk about after that Blues Hall of Fame ceremony of how much it impacted them, those are the guys I think it resonates with and takes that mindset. It's the guys that have been in the league long enough that have their own traditions, their own routines that they do. Those are the ones that I wonder if it just goes in one ear and out the other.
But let's say there's 4 to 5 guys on the team that it resonates with, and they're going to come back different. You got another 19 guys who it's not resonating with, and it's hard to bring that team to the ice every night and have that attitude.
Which one's more likely, though? Do you think it's more likely 4 or 5 guys heard it and the other group didn't? Or do you think it's more likely that the other group didn't and 4 to 5 guys didn't hear it?
I think they hear it. I just don't know that on November 11th against the Washington Capitals, it means anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you got to get the guys that it does.
And that's the part.
You got to go out and get the guys that it matters.
Yep.
And that's the part of coaching that is just, it baffles me because like, how are you supposed to get those guys engaged to that? Other than like, if there was ever a season that those guys should be engaged with what he said, it should be this coming season because they just realized what it takes to make the playoffs. and you can't be good. It's not like what it was the previous season where a magical February till April and you get into the playoffs and you're rewarded because you worked hard for 2 months. Like this was, you missed the playoffs by 4 points because you weren't ready to play in the season. And if it doesn't resonate at the beginning of this season, then you really know it's not going to.
Ooh, boy, that scare. But you're 100% correct. What are these next group of assistant coaches? What are they going to be?
God, you and I must be in the same brain wavelength, because I was just thinking, it's like, man, I should mention the assistant coaches.
I was starting to get kind of excited when Coach Montgomery was talking about somebody that had a lot of energy and thinks cerebrally. I was like, hey, maybe that's
Donny?
me. And then he starts talking about teaching defensemen all the little ins and outs. And I'm like, well,
Pivots.
damn it. Then I can't do
Donny's
that.
like, I want to punch people in the face.
But how do you guys, what does this staff need? What does Jim Montgomery need? Obviously help with the special teams.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about that. But what do you guys think in that arena?
Well, I just like the way that they framed it, in terms of who they want to bring in. And for those who missed it again, so many times in the NHL, it's like, oh, that guy is available. Oh, that guy, he's coached, he's been part of a cup team or something like that. And then they bring that guy in and maybe his attributes don't fit what the Blues need. So the Blues are looking at it conversely by saying, hey, what are our needs? Certainly special teams, but, Jim Montgomery and Doug Armstrong laid it out, and you said it. We want somebody who thinks cerebrally. We want somebody who can relate to the players and communicate well. We want somebody, and they laid out the characteristics. And so they said they're going to make a checklist of things that they want, and then they're going to see who fits that, and then go out and see if they're available. So you don't go out and get a name coach who maybe he's out of a head coaching job and he's looking to get back in, and you bring him in here and then he doesn't fit, what they're doing. So it could take some time. The guys that they end up wanting might not be available, might not want to come here, but at least they got the right approach.
Special teams, big, cerebral mindset, big, but I also think it's going to have to be somebody that can work with younger players. Because if you look specifically on the defensive side, you're going to have 3 guys with less than a year combined in the NHL, right? Like Mayu, Lindstein, Jiricek probably in your top 3. And then on the forward side of things, you assume Stenberg's there, Dvorsky's going to be there, as well as Snuggerud, who's continuing to develop, and then bringing in a Justin Carbonneau and maybe another guy from the American Hockey League. So I think on top of all of this, you're going to have somebody that can teach the younger players, just like Jim Montgomery's attributes were. I mean, that was the one thing Doug Armstrong talked about with him, was like, he not only can win now, but he also is a guy that can develop some of the younger pieces, and rightfully so if you look at how some of these guys have played this year. I think you're going to have to find guys that, kind of like the comment from Doug a few years ago of finding a way to channel and connect with the younger pieces. I think you're going to have to find some coaches that can have success in that front.
Do you think Jiricek being on the team next year is a given at this point? Because you, especially over the course of the last month or so, Alex, it feels like it seems like you are really convinced that he is going to be. And I'm wondering, why wouldn't you bring in a sort of a veteran presence back there to, again, while Mayu's learning, while Lindstein's learning, and then you kind of maybe slow roll your check.
I don't know if anything's a given.
Sure.
For this team.
And maybe that's a poor choice of words for me.
No. I'm about 95% convinced he's on this team next year because they need more offense from the defensemen. And I mean, from everything I've heard from people like scouts and whatnot, it seems like they feel like this guy's ready to translate it. Now, that's a lot easier said than done once you get to the NHL level, but I'm more convinced Jiricek's on this team than Carbonneau's on this team. Just because where's Carbonneau playing unless you make moves? And, we don't know if that's going to be the case for either the defense or the forward side. But yeah, I think if I'm looking at it, Jiricek's a 3rd pair defenseman for me next year, and Tucker's a 7th defenseman because he adds more offense, and you feel like his game can translate to the NHL level fairly quickly.
Yeah, if this were a year ago where they're trying to still be on that competitive track, and not saying they're not trying to be, but now it's really focused on that future. I think that lends itself for him to have more of an opportunity to start the Blues season with him, as opposed to what it would have been in the past. And that combined with the fact that he's probably more ready to make that jump than a lot of players his age. The other ones, Stenberg, Steen, you needed a little bit of time, but he might be able to come up. Now, all that said, defense is the absolute hardest.
Oh, yeah.
And he might look lights out in junior hockey, and then we see in camp, look, we were saying, as Jim Montgomery was saying, Logan Mailloux is ready. And then we found out he wasn't.
Right.
So that can happen. But where the Blues are with Jiricek poised to make that jump, I think give him the best opportunity to do it if anybody could do it.
Is Steve Ott going to remain the coach in Springfield? Do you guys know?
So his contract's up, if I'm not mistaken. It's just a matter of if he wants to stay in that front or pursue an NHL job.
Yeah, I think the Blues would love it if he would stay in Springfield. He's got him in the playoffs.
Yeah.
We got a Zoom call with him today.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think that he might get some calls from NHL teams.
I think if you were to ask the Blues, they're hoping he stays too.
Okay.
Just because, man, if you could get, let's just say it's one more year of Steve Ott, that's 1 year of working with these guys for a full season, but also him being down there with potentially Carbonell, potentially Jiricek, potentially a couple of kids that may come over from the KHL or the Swedish Hockey League, and then whoever they draft in this upcoming draft if they get lucky enough to have the top pick. So, I mean, you could have a lot more pieces that are integral to the future of the Blues. If you have Steve Ott down there, that's a good piece to have and a mouthpiece that connects with Jim Montgomery.
Absolutely so. Is there anything with Monty or with Army, because obviously we're going to have Army here on Wednesday, that kind of stood out to you that we haven't talked about here today, guys?
No, I don't think so. I think we hit on everything. Just that it's time to move on, and it's time, I'm going to put it in Jordan Binnington's words, start the process, do your work, get back into it. Yeah, you take some time off, but I can't remember who else said it, but it's I think Doug Armstrong said it a few times here. It's not what I think, it's what they do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. That should be the mantra this season and the title of the podcast.
Boom.
Today.
I was going actually something simpler, but that's much better.
It's got
no more vibe check.
It can't be what people think. Like, it's got to be what they do. So many words were spoken, and I'm not saying that they weren't respectful, but it's got to be the action. Like, if the way last season ended and all the talk about having a good start didn't lead to any of that, then what does it matter?
Right.
Like, it matters if on November 11th against the Washington Capitals you get smacked and you smack back. Like, that's what matters. I think that's where the Blues are at.
I will say this too, hearing Doug Armstrong talk about kind of now what happens with Steen, and he'll be able to talk about this more on Wednesday in the podcast, but it sure sounded like any moves that are made are Steen's final call. Yeah. Like Doug said, I've kind of slowly had him take a little bit more control. And he even told the players after the deadline, like, I'm not making any more trades. I'm not making any more waiver claims. Like, this is it. Steen takes over from here. So he did say that he's going to be the one steamheading the draft, as well as Tony Feltrin. But that was the part that really caught me. He said, this is a pretty important or a massive next few months in the St. Louis Blues franchise future. So, I did find that fascinating because you asked him if there's an appetite to move up in the draft, move around in the draft. I think the activity for the Blues happens before the draft so that things are kind of set in place and then Steen can kind of slow roll his way into this. But I thought that was pretty interesting that he said, like, hey, Steen is the general manager moving forward. And then on July 1st, he is the guy.
I'm also kind of wondering, and maybe I'm completely wrong because God knows I've been wrong 800 times this year, but I'm kind of obviously, very much so. But I'm wondering if they're taking all 3 picks in the first round too.
If you were to ask me to wager on that now, I'd say I'd put all my money on no, they don't.
They don't.
Yeah. I'd put my money on they may make one selection in that draft. And then use the other pieces to move around or move pieces out. After hearing him talk about the accumulation of all of the assets that they've gotten over these last few years, this just doesn't feel like the season that they're going to add 3 more first-round picks into their pipeline. This feels like the draft where they add in one big piece or they try and assist the NHL club with those assets. But I could be completely wrong.
I will say this, just as the way in which that I look at things, I am going to be much, much more judicious in my approach to this team next year and trying to like keep myself balanced, because Mr. Stillman even said it. I believe we got above our skis, I believe is what he said. and I just did. I just thought that this team was much better when our friend Dom from The Athletic gave him 86 points or whatever.
I guess I need to stop being so critical.
I wanted to friggin' riot, and he was right.
I hate saying it, Donny.
So I just think that like with this team, until we start to see them sort of, I don't know, like feed off of themselves, I think I just want to kind of see what happens.
Zane, I need you to clip this so that in October of next year, we're going to Wayne's World it.
What's going to happen is they're going to start off like on fire.
Gangbusters.
And dude, I'm going to be bringing in a replica Stanley Cup here in October. Like that is what's probably going to happen. I'm just telling you that I'm going to try to be better about it.
I appreciate working.
At least you didn't write what Dom got wrong as your headline.
I like that headline. It's just not a whole lot right now.
All right. So again, we will return to the studio on Wednesday morning and have Blues general manager Doug Armstrong, boom, right in that chair.
Unless JR decides to sit there.
You can always email us, lmbp@1057thepoint.com. For Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, I'm Donny Fandango. Thank you as always for listening and watching. And as always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast on 101 ESPN
is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.